Hey, what's up guys? In this video, we're gonna cover how to upload image assets, video assets, or other file types to AWS S3. So how do we upload our images from our local machine to the cloud, render them in the UI of our application, so on and so forth. And how does that work? How does it get from the client to the server to the cloud and then back to the client to display? We're gonna break down all of those concepts. Stay tuned, let's get started. All right, first things first, we need to conceptualize this concept and break it down so that you can understand kind of what we're gonna do in the code and how does this whole process work in the first place. So you have your client. This is gonna have typically base 64 encoded content, base 64. So you can use any format that you'd like, but you need a format. I usually use base 64. And in our API request, we're gonna send that to the client, or the server, And the server is then going to basically, through our backend logic, through Node.js and Express, we are then going to upload that to the cloud, the AWS cloud. And then once that's uploaded to the cloud, we'll get a confirmation, and our code execution here will continue onwards, and then we'll send the response back to the client. Now, you need to display these images, right? We need a way to basically render our uploaded images. So what that kind of looks like is basically you'll have your, what I save in my env, my .env or .default on the back end. These two env files are credential files. I typically save my base asset URL, and then that will point to the droplet or the hosting endpoint, that bucket, because you store your code through buckets, and a bucket is basically a container that holds all your assets. And that bucket will then, with that string, so it'll be like HTTPS, blah, 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 and then slash, and then your ID of whatever you uploaded to the cloud, whatever you assigned that value while you were saving it. So basically the way to do this is to basically have your URL, the ID or the name of your file saved in the cloud, and then that will render on the client appropriately. All right, let's get into the code now. All right, guys, so here's the code that I've configured. I have the styling for the drop zone and then the actual component itself, so we can just focus on the back-end API requests, so the back-end logic and the API requests. This is what it looks like in the application. So you hover, it highlights, hover, highlights. You just click this, you can upload a file, or you can simply drag and drop, okay? So what we need to do is implement the logic that actually uploads this array of images, displays it. So display, upload, and then render it and feed it back from the URL that we talked about with the ID at the end or the name of the file at the end. I use IDs for that. So a quick little recap on what we're doing. We're going to upload our files here. We're going to click them and drag, drop, or click. They're going to be displayed or rendered right below here. And then the button will actually upload those or send those to the back end, which will then upload to AWS S3. What is S3? S3 is basically a storage aspect of Amazon Web Services or AWS Web Services. And it's similar to like Lambda with serverless servers or Lightsail for deployment. It's just a service that AWS provides. However, this service is based on storage, online cloud-based storage. So storing your files, your videos, your images, all that stuff in the cloud, so we don't have to store it locally on our machine, or I guess our server. So before we do any of this, we need to configure our AWS services, so our S3 services. I'm logged into Amazon Web Services right now, and you want to search at the top here for S3. Now I already have S3 pulled up. I'll just click this though. And we need to basically build our bucket, so where we're going to store our bucket, and then we need to import our keys, our access key, our secret key, and things of that nature, so that we can configure our bucket in our environment locally speaking. So I'm going to create a bucket here, and I'm just going to call this my test bucket. Name it whatever you want. Just remember the name. I'm going to choose copy settings from an existing bucket. We'll do this one because I need the configuration. I'll show you here in a second. We're going to not block all access. That's fine because I want people to be able to access these URLs. And we're just going to continue down and skip all that and create our bucket. You got to choose a bucket that no one else has already chosen, and that worked. Okay, so what I wanted to show you is the permissions, I believe it is. So we need to import some policies here, not the cores, but the bucket policy. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into AWS S3. We're going to go into our general purpose buckets, and we're just going to copy. We're going to copy this snippet of code and then merge it into our what we need it to look like or be like. So, and the reason why you have to do this is the images won't be accessible otherwise. So this code right here, and I'll make this bigger. I'll share this also in the YouTube video. Somewhere in the description I'll put this, or you can just screenshot it. Okay, so we're in our bucket, and we're going to paste this in the permissions tab under the policy. So right here, bucket policy, edit. And I'm going to paste that. And then what you need to do is copy this bucket ARN. Copy that bucket ARN. And then just paste it as the resource with the slash at the end. So slash and then apostrophe or whatever that is. Let me try to zoom in on this so you can see this. See if I can zoom in. So this is what it should look like. You can find this online if you just look up policies in I guess AWS policy S3. You'll be able to find something like this. But this is what we want right here. So let me zoom out. And I'm going to save this policy. All right, so our policy saved. So now we need to basically, you need to go up here and then go into your security credentials, and then you need to copy. I'll just show you. I'll blur this out if there's anything. You need to copy your access key and your secret key. So see this key ID right here? I got to blur this out, but you'll see under your access keys, you'll have a key ID, and then you'll have a secret key. We'll need those. So now we're going to jump into the code part of this project. So let's go into our folder here. Just clone this. This is in the YouTube description. Just clone this project. This give you a boilerplate to work off of. But I'm going to go into this file here, and I'm going to add AWS. It's the default JSON config. It's the env.env equivalent for the backend. AWS access key ID, and then AWS secret key ID, and then AWS region, and then AWS bucket name. So add all these values so that we can fill these in here in a moment. All right, guys, so I have my env, my default JSON configured with my endpoint, my base asset URL, my access key, my secret key, my MongoDB, which is useless. We don't need that, but just it's configured there just cause. So we're back in the client now. What we need to do basically with this right here is we need to wire this logic up now. So the logic is already wired up. However, so this handle submission is the on click on the upload files button. So, but however, when this drop zone registers something, it adds it to accepted files. So what we're going to do here is we're going to go into that handle submission. We're going to do for, and then we're going to do a loop here, and then we're going to do state accepted files. We can actually just do accepted files and then deconstruct that state object. So that way it's cleaner and it's more legible. And that basically pulls off that accepted files from the state value or object. And then we're going to do image. And now we need to figure out what do we want to do with this image, right? So basically what we need to do is convert each image into base 64. So what we're going to do is take this toBase64 function, and we're going to do const. We're going to assign it. Well, we'll do const base64 image, and then we'll also attach the other information from that. So what we'll do here is we'll create an object .image. So it's going to pull off all this file information here, the name, the type, all that stuff. And then what we're going to do is do base64 and then await. And we need to create this as a asynchronous function. So this basically says wait for this to complete with the image conversion. And then so this base64, so if we log this, let's see if this works. Should log each base64 plus the image itself. And this is going to wait for that response to end before continuing. So let's see here. And voila, base64 image. So we can see we have our base64 here, and then we have all of our other information. Okay, so now what we want to do is we have our images here. So let's go ahead and let's render these through base64. So we need to go down below drop zone, create another HR here just for keep it clean, and we're going to do a template or a injection here. So some brackets. And then what we're going to do is type of state. We want to check to make sure accepted files is not undefined. Otherwise, we'll get an error with this next line. And then state accepted files length greater than 0. State accepted files map. So this is going to map each item out, each image. And then open those brackets and close them. And then, so what we're going to return here is just a image tag with a source of, take the image here, and the base64 property. Base64 property. So let's see what this does. So that is not rendering, unfortunately. Render base64 image React.js. I need to quickly search how to do this base64 in the actual image itself. Oh yeah, duh, guys, look, we didn't assign the state. We just created the value. So set state previous state. Let me zoom this in for y'all so you can see it better. So set state, previous state, and then we're going to return and then open bracket for the object inside previous state. So this is going to take the previous, all the previous state, so it updates only what we want. Accepted files, and then we're going to do a bracket here, previous state, accepted files. So it's going to take all the existing accepted files, deconstruct them, and break them into like to basically take that array and merge it with this array. And then what we're going to do is base64 image. And so that's going to, every time that's going to add a new item to the array. I just realized something that is kind of problematic is we're not doing that for the drag and drop. Right? It only registers files when you upload them. So we need to do this part right here. We need to basically copy this logic, assign that in here. However, I think we should just create a function to keep it clean. So const handle accepted files. Okay, here we go. And then we're going to take that state here. We're going to get rid of that. And then we're just going to break this down and do handle accepted files. So now when we drop this, it'll run this logic, create that as an asynchronous function as well. It'll run this and it'll assign the values appropriately. So let's give this a whirl here. All right, so I click this. Now after I'm done with this, once right now, these two will show up. Boom, voila. Okay, so we're on the right track or trajectory here. Now that our images are properly rendering here, we need to actually do the API request to upload the files when we click that. So here's the good stuff. This is the stuff you guys probably came here for. So we need the handle submission here. We're going to remove this logic here. We're going to keep that deconstructed variable here, and we're going to remove the rest, the for loop. So what we need to do is create a API request. So const config. This is going to be the configuration pass to the post request, and then Axios post. Post is to add data. So you have a couple different types. You have like put. You have get to fetch data. You have post. So we're going to use post. We're just going to hard code this HTTP localhost 8000 because our server is running on port 8000. And then we're going to pass that configuration object. And we're going to do a dot then for a promise-based system here. We're going to console log the res data. And then we want to catch the error because we'll probably get an error as we debug. And we want to see what that error is. Now we want to pass the accepted files into the configuration object. We've deconstructed that, so instead of doing that, we're just going to do that and deconstruct it. It's like best practice ES6 syntax. And we're just going to make this endpoint say save files. Okay, so we're going to copy that, save this file. We're going to go into the server, and we're going to, below the connection open, we're going to do app use, and then we're going to paste that, and then we're going to require a file which we have not created yet. So in the server, we're going to create the routes folder, and this will be created when you actually create the project. And then we need to create a folder in there called files. And then we're going to create a file called upload. And I'm going to delete this when I push this to GitHub so that you can follow along. But yeah, now we have our server here. So let's go back, our server file. Let's import that. So routes, files, upload. Save that. And now we're going to build our API request. This will be the last leg of this tutorial. And this will actually upload to AWS. And then what we're going to do is we're also going to display through here, through the UI. We need to import Axios in our client side though. I didn't see that. At the very top, just go import Axios from Axios. Axios is like fetch or node fetch, things of that nature. It is a API request library that allows or facilitates API requests. Now let's start building out our API requests. So we're going to require a couple things here. So we're going to bring in const config equals require config. This is how we will import our environmental variables here in default JSON. And then we want to bring in, what was it called? AWS equals require AWS SDK. We're going to install that AWS SDK, npm install AWS SDK. And we also need to bring in the router. So let's go npm run dev. It's not a script. Let's see here. Start. So npm run start is what starts the server. And our server won't start because, lo and behold, in our file, we have not exported router. So we're going to const router equals, well, first we need to bring in express. Express equals require express. And then we need to bring in the router. Const router equals express router. And then call that function. And then we're going to do router post slash. And then we're going to pass our callback, our rec, and our response. And then we're going to export module exports equals router. And that will import this route as save files there. So our server should be running, and it is. Our MongoDB is up and running. Everything's going good. So we also want to basically, what else do we need to bring in here? Oh, Axios. Const Axios require Axios. And that should be good for now. So we want to deconstruct the accepted files that we sent in that request, which you can see right here. We sent the accepted files as a argument or parameter to that request as the body basically. And then we want to basically console log that to see those files, accepted files. So we're just going to test this API request to see if the backend's even registering. So we're going to upload 2 images, or select 2 images. And we're going to click that, see the backend here, and can't find Axios. So we need to install Axios on the back end. And I'm going to let that run. npm run start to restart the server. And we're going to try this once more. Uno más. So clicked. Nothing. Clicked. So it's saying that error failed is blocked by cores. So we need to add cores to our project. So if we go into app, server.js, app use, and just call cores. And at the top here, const cores equals cores. Cores basically allows you to proxy origin requests or to proxy requests by origin. And there we go. Request entity too large. So the payload is too large, which is good, but bad. This is good and bad because our API request is actually hitting and it's taking that request body, but the body is too large. And then the bad news is we still have an error. So let's go into our code. We need to add some more stuff here. So we need to do app use. We're going to use some body parser here. Well, let's go to the express JSON, and we're going to pass it a limit of, let's give it 500 megabytes. And then we also need to do app use express URL encoded, and then once again a limit of 500 megabytes. This is extreme. This is a large limit, but just to get this working, we're going to do this. So let's give this once more, uno más. We should see the request body now. And there we go. There's our request body. That's the base 64 that we were looking for. So that solved our issue with the payload response type to being too large. And now we need to basically take care of that base 64 and upload that. So what we are going to do, let's see here. What we need to do is essentially, okay, let's do the S3 stuff first. So at the very top, let's do const S3 bucket equals new AWS, and then what was it? S3 capital letters, and then open brackets, params, and then once more another bracket there. And we're going to do, we got the bucket name, so bucket, and then config get, and then we're going to take that bucket name right there. Okay, and now that we have our bucket name, we can now actually utilize this AWS instance here in our code here. All right, so let's start by looping over our accepted files. So map, and then file index. We don't need the index, just file. And then we create a callback and a function there. So what we want to do is we want to deconstruct the base 64 from the file. We'll put the object here in a second. So we're going to do AWS S3 bucket put object. And it comes with a couple values. Key, what was it? Body, and content type. Okay, so let's see here. Capitalize that K for the key. So the key, okay, so the key is basically what it's going to save the item as. So we're going to use UUID v4 and then call that function. And we're going to need to install that, but it's basically const UUID v4 equals require UUID. And the actual syntax here, I believe, v4 semicolon UUID v4. So we're going to paste that there. Just have v4 semicolon and then UUID v4. Save that. We're going to have to now install that. npm install UUID. This is a unique identifier, and you would just basically save this in MongoDB in order to, in order to basically tell exactly what that file is. So once I save it in AWS, I need to correlate it to MongoDB so I can know, like, say a profile picture, right? You save in MongoDB, or sorry, save in AWS, but you still don't know whose that profile picture belongs to or whose that is. So you would basically take that ID that saves the AWS key and then use that as an identifier in your MongoDB collection. So npm run start, and we're getting, the asynchronous. We need to make this function async. Oops, not that one. We need to make this one, the map asynchronous. And then, so we're going to give that UUID there. And then the body is going to be obviously the base 64. And then what we need to do is figure out a way to deconstruct what the file type is right here. So what we're going to do is we're actually going to split by base 64 and then take the value before it, I think, is probably the best way to do this. Or split by data and then take the first value. Okay, that's what we'll do. So what we're going to do here is we're going to do const, and that was base 64. Const, let's see, content type, capital letters, so that we can deconstruct that and make that easier to read. We're going to do base 64 split by data semicolon, and then we're going to take that first value. So what that's going to do is it's going to split right here, and then it's going to take the first value. The zero index value would be right here, or data itself. Let's log that and see what that does. Let's just check this out. Console log. I'm going to copy and paste that. And I'm just going to log that out for now. So let's see what this does. We have two files here. Submit. They're doing their thing. That's all base 64. Alright, I don't see... Okay, what we're going to have to do is we're going to have to actually log that out. We're going to have to log those accepted files, like get rid of that basically for now. Because otherwise it's just taking up too much of the code. Oh, I see. Okay. So we need to take part 0, and that should give us the content type. The first items after the split. Content type, nothing. So, I figured out what's going on. We got to split it twice. So our first split was appropriate, but we need to split it. We need to split it at that semicolon, and then split at the other semicolon and take that first one as well. So we want the 0 to the 1. So let's try that again, see what that does. Undefined. So let's just take that. Oh, it's a semicolon. So there's our content type right there. That'll consistently get our content type. Now let's try uploading this. Now that we have our content type, we have our body, we have our ID. Let's just do const result, and then let's log that result to see what that does. And let's see if this uploads these images. But before we test this, we need to do a couple more things, some configuration housekeeping things. We need to add promise to this result, the put object for the AWS object bucket. And then also, we're going to get rid of that entirely because we know that's coming in. And we need to assign a variable, const buffer value equals buffer from, and then this is going to be the, let's see, base 64 split, and we want to split it by the semicolon basically, because you have you have all the pretext and then you have the actual base 64 separated by the comma. So separated by the comma, and then take 1, and then we're going to assign that as base 64. So now we want to pass that buffer value instead of just a straight base 64. Now it is converted and ready to go to be uploaded to AWS. Let's save that, and we're going to give this a run here. See what I'm talking about here in the base64? It has that comma there. So we're getting rid of that and just uploading that. All right, let's see here. So we have no objects in our database yet, or in our buckets or bucket. I'm just reloading the client side, and we're gonna drag. We're gonna select one. We could drag and drop, I guess, but there's no point in doing that. Open, and now we're gonna upload these. So the backend content type ran, but we get an error here. Missing credentials in config. Oh, right. So, okay, we need to basically assign the access key and secret key and stuff like that in the server file. So copy the AWS variable here at the top, go into the server, go ahead and paste that. And then we want to do AWS config update. And we're going to pass the couple object key values. So first one, AWS config update access key ID, and then we want to pass it secret access key, and then we want to pass it region. Okay, so now just basically go into your default JSON and import the appropriate values that correspond to each one of these using the same syntax like config get value here, so on and so forth. So I have the appropriate key values here assigned and updated. The server should have refreshed. Here you can see we have a fresh server. Let's give that upload another try. And there we go. We can see we got our etag result, etag server-side encryption, etag server-side encryption. So if we go into our AWS bucket, we have no objects currently prior. Let's reload this, and we should have two objects. Well, bam, two objects. So these are the IDs, right? These are the IDs of what you would want to save in your database, essentially. So you can pull this object ID. But notice educational bucket S3, and then blah, blah, blah. You want to basically take, let me copy this. You would want to take your string, your base image asset URL to be like that, right? And then whatever image, whatever ID you want to reference in your application, you would just do blah, blah, blah ID. I'll show you that working example here in a second. So this is the image that we uploaded. So that's one image. That would be the right-hand side one. And then the left-hand side one would be this guy. So our images are definitely uploading. They're storing properly. They're not persisting in the cloud, so we can reference them at any time. So if you wanted to let me show you how I reference something like this. So I would take this URL in my React project. So if I go to React here, I need to create an env. And then all React apps are prefaced, whatever, with React app underscore, and then I'm going to do base asset URL. And then I would just paste that like that without the slash. And so the way I would reference that in my application would be something like this. So in my app.js, if I wanted to assign initial image, I could just do a template literal, or say I had an image tag. Say the image tag, where'd you go? Here. Let me wrap this. This image tag right here, what I would do if I'm using the image and mapping over all my images, I would do template literal, inject, process, env, boom, and then slash, and then whatever the image ID might be. And that's a excellent way to reference that ID that we're talking about right here. I'm going to undo that. So this is nice and proper. And yeah, that's how you set up a image front end, like the image form, configuring cores, body parser. Well, we didn't configure body parser, but the express cores limits, the the parsing limits, I should say, and then setting up your files and your AWS config, stuff of that nature. I hope this was helpful. If you enjoyed this video, please leave a like or subscribe. Thanks, and have a wonderful day. Take care, guys.